What's going on, all you wonderful people? Today's video, I want to go over my review scale criteria for every single video game that I play. A little bit of backstory here. I have been writing reviews as kind of like a side hobby sort of a thing for many years, since I started college. So it was a while ago. We'll just leave it at that. And when I started writing those reviews, a lot of things that my professors told me about, especially when it came to being a critique on certain things, is you want to make sure you're consistent. Generate a system when you rate something so that it sounds and feels the same across the board all the time whenever you make any kind of a review, so that the scores are consistent and people can look back on older reviews and see how it follows, your tastes, but also how you feel about certain games. And I designed this little bit of a matrix, if you will, where I've taken 10 different aspects of video games and I rate every single aspect against every game that I review evenly. A lot of people might look at some aspects and rate it higher or value it more importantly than others, such as, gameplay or a story, challenges, things like that. Game time and value for your money, and they tend to gloss over other aspects of the game so that just because the things that appeal to them are better antiquated. And that's kind of like where I feel a lot of opinions tend to sway and differ. But for my scale that I made, I try to make it so that I only focus on those aspects. And that way, even if I don't necessarily have a positive experience with a game, I still, feel like I should rate it, higher based on, how much effort the developers put into the game and, and all that. So with that in mind, the 10 aspects that I rate every game on is based on story or setting, the gameplay, obviously, visual style and graphics, the flow of the game, music, characters / world building / lore, kind of a category there, the challenge of the game itself, replayability or memorability, and unique aspects and details like little minor things that show that the developers really went above and beyond to put into their game, and then my own personal thoughts and opinions so that it gets its own little subset category. For each of those categories, I give a scale score of 0 through 4, with 0 being something that is a poor example of that, while 4 being an exceptional example of that. And then I add it all up and basically add it up, and it's blank out of 40 possible points. And that's kind of like how I do my scale criteria, especially when I do my best of lists, which will be coming to my blog. And I'll actually link the blog in the description below if you want to follow me along with my posts for gaming and things of that nature. I'm still in the process of compiling together all of my reviews, and I still got a couple of games I still want to play through. So you probably won't see that post until closer to the end of the year. But I just feel like supplementing that with this video because I'm looking at my rankings here and it's all over the place. Like there's a lot of games that, many major outlets are calling for game of the year that just don't measure up. And there are games where people are like, oh, I've never even heard of this game, or, that game wasn't really that great, and I'll defend why it is, and I'll put it a little bit higher. So be prepared for that. But to basically line out the story and gameplay and all those other qualities of the game and what I look for, starting with story, it's got to have a solid narrative, obviously, or at least a solid setting. It doesn't have to be Shakespeare in nature. A great example of that is a game like Fall Guys, where takes place in a game show style setting. There's not an overarching storyline with romance or drama or there's thrills, chills, and spills, sure, but it's not an overarching narrative. It's just you're a bean trying to win in a game show, but they execute that very perfectly. So it's not something that I would necessarily rate low. I would actually rate it high because the sense of immersion there with the cameras on propellers and things of that nature really amplify the game. Next, you have gameplay. Now, gameplay is a 0 through 4 scale based on how playable the actual game is. The controls, the mechanics that you install in the game and how you follow through with it, And then, of course, largely avoiding any kind of bugs, glitches, and other things like that. So a game that would get like a 0 gameplay is a game like the E.T. game for the Atari. For any of the really, really old folk like me out there who remembers that sort of thing, it was, virtually unplayable. It was a very terrible example of a game. Conversely, you have a game like Dark Souls, which has its extremely well fleshed out combat, strategy, but also, get good style skill based ceiling. And it's just silky smooth, buttery smooth. Ori and the Will of the Wisps, or Ori and the Blind Forest, are examples of another great example of gameplay where it introduces mechanics gradually but sticks with them throughout the entire game and doesn't try to cheat you out by taking some away or, giving some later. Next, of course, visual style and graphics. This is where I think a lot of people tend to benchmark how popular a game is by how pretty it looks. Obviously, that great first impression is extremely important when it comes to games. And of course, a 0 would be a game that is riddled with various graphical issues and bugs. Assassin's Creed Unity is my poster child punching bag for this particular category. I always use that as an example. If you've ever seen hilarious visual glitches with that, look it up. Mass Effect Andromeda on release, when it was there with all the awful facial animations and glitches, that's another thing that's example of that. And it scales up all the way up to, your breathtaking, oh my God, this is truly next gen, this is mind blowing, or even games that have a tremendous attention and art style like a Journey or an Okami. They're not like super realistic textures, but it's very gorgeous to stare at. Those are great examples of great visual style and graphics that I look for. Next is the flow of the game. The flow of the game is extremely important because if it doesn't keep your attention and keep you dangling the carrot and with a reward system enough to keep you playing through the game, that's how people tend to just give up on the game. So 0's examples of flow games are games that are just have no direction, absolutely, no thought to how the game should progress, what they want it to be, in a loss of identity kind of a thing. Whereas something that flows perfectly well throughout the entire game, and I'm going to keep using Souls games as an example, but it's really just a great example of different types of things they do so well. Dark Souls 1 being a self-contained world that is easy to traverse around, find your way around the area. All the worlds kind of connect. It's just a beautiful example of how a game can flow and just, take you from place to place while still bringing you, if you need to backtrack or something, it's usually not that far away. The level design in that game is just off the charts. And that's a great example of that flow type of game, with middle stops being things that have like oversized, bloated side quests and things that aren't really rewarding and are just kind of there to run up the game time. And it's great for those completionists that want to find all of those little things. But for the vast majority of players and in the context of the game, you don't really get anything out of it, just aside from just saying, look, I collected all of these things. Next I look at is music. Music is important. It supplements, it provides the atmosphere to the game and the scenes and what is happening on the screen. On top of that, you have sound editing and mixing with sound effects that help drive and hammer home the points and the big moments that the game is trying to convey to you. Games with terrible, garbled sound. I forget the name of it. It was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game, and it just had the same repeated, garbled, cowabunga dudes, over and over and over again. And the game play was phenomenal and really fun and enjoyable for a beat 'em up game, but my God, that sound was just grating on the ears, so it wouldn't score very high. Meanwhile, you have a Persona 5 soundtrack, which is, in my opinion, one of the best soundtracks to come out of the last 5 years in video games. Absolutely solid banger, not a bad track on it. The sound effects is great. The voice acting is solid. Those kind of things go into that music and sound category. Next, you have the characters and the world building and the lore. And this is a section that basically, you can have the best narrative and the best, Shakespearean style story written out, but if you don't have a compelling cast of characters and players and, companions and, creatures and environments to bring that story to life, it kind of just falls flat. And that's what I look at with characters and world building. So things like, just super paper thin character development or character tropes that are just used over and over again and used poorly, usually with really poor voice acting, tends to rate really low. Whereas, an excellent cast of main supporting and villain characters that, you get invested with, that you feel their plight throughout the entirety of their journey, really tends to scale and I rate much, much higher. Next is challenge. Challenging games are, challenge is what makes a game, interactive in the first place. It separates it from being just a standard movie. Even with games like The Walking Dead Season 1 and the Telltale game series, where it's mostly quick time events, there's still a bit of challenge. You still have to hit the correct button combinations, and depending on the kind of game you're playing, that can have a number of outcomes across the entire story. So challenges that rate really low are challenges that just simply aren't play tested and just are overly difficult because of performance issues, like, that fake challenge, if you will. That will definitely get you a 0 in my book. And then it scales up to things like having cheap or arbitrary difficulty, like the control room in GoldenEye doesn't get a very high mark from me because the AI is just handicapping you from doing what the game wants you to do. Also, things with power levels and areas with zones that says you need to be X level, so you just monotonously grind over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, the bullets in your gun suddenly decide they want to work, and you start mowing down people like it's no problem. And so Borderlands, for example, was kind of a cheap style, not like really low end, but probably I'd rate it maybe a 2 or so because it has those cheap power level mechanics. But the gunplay and the challenge of beating the bosses are still very high and still very enjoyable. And then you get all the way up to the high challenges that, reward high skill or tactics and player involvement. And then I said it before a couple times, but the Soul series is a great example of that. Next, you have replayability / memorability. These used to be 2 separate categories for me, and I kind of merged them together because when I think about it, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is an absolutely fantastic game from start to finish, but it's 100 hours long. And it's not something that you just sit there and be like, man, I am done with the game, but I am ready to just jump right back in and start a brand new playthrough of another 100 hours of it. You don't really do that, but you remember it. You definitely recall it being an exciting and enthralling experience. So that's why I kind of put them both together. Meanwhile, multiplayer games like 2018's Among Us is just so addicting and fun, and the rounds are short but very enjoyable and entertaining. And anybody that calls me up or messages me on my Discord and is like, yo, we're playing Among Us, I'm like, yes, if I'm available, I'm down, let's go. You're always up for a round. So those kinds of addicting gameplay or just memorable stories and things that you will talk about for years to come is how I rate that particular category. The next category I mentioned was unique aspects and details. And aspects and details of the game is kind of like the intangibles of a game. You can have a great story, you can have great characters, you can have a pretty well fleshed out and enjoyable environment, but it's when the developers take it and go that extra mile, really focusing on how much love and dedication they put into their project that I try to rate. And a great example of that is from this year's Demon's Souls from the PlayStation 5. It's a gorgeous game. It plays exactly like the original Demon's Souls. Blue Point Games did a great job of taking a lot of love and care when they did this remake. But little details that they didn't have to throw in at all, and nobody would even really notice them, but they put it in anyway because of the passion they had for the job and for their project, really just makes that game shine more. And one example I will throw out is how when you kill a soul or a boss, especially in the first area of Boletaria, for example, the Phalanx boss, in the lore of the game, the Phalanx was a legendary archer. And when you kill a boss, like their soul essence leaves the hulking body of the demon's soul, of the demon's body. But if you look really closely, there is an actual trace image in the soul pattern of an archer. It's up there for a brief instant, you blink and you miss it, but they went and made that deliberately. And those are the kind of unique aspects and details that really make the game just stand out and shine on its own. And it shows that the developers had so much great love and passion for their project. So that's a hard category for me to grade, and it's the one I usually spend the most time really watching and eyeballing every little detail of the game to find out, did they really care about this project, or was it something like, okay, we just need to make money here, let's just do this thing and make it work. And then finally, my own personal thoughts is how I felt with the game, my own personal experience with it. There are some games that I have played that I have thoroughly enjoyed from start to finish and would play again anytime. And then there are games that, I enjoyed, but I could be fine with never playing again. It's basically my own opinion. It's a 0 through 4 of how I felt about playing the game. And that's, just a way for me to put my own personal touch and flair into my reviews. So with all that being said, I hope this clears up how I look at various games and how I choose to rate them. And again, your mileage might vary. I'd love to hear your opinions. This is why I have this channel. This is why I have my blog. This is why I have my Twitch channel, which I'm also linking in the description, in the comments section, the description below thingy. Yeah. So I hope you guys enjoyed this little glimpse into my brain and how it works. And if there's like facets that I might be missing that you think would make a great also component to gaming that I am missing, drop a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear about it. I might just add it in and make it a permanent fixture and go back and look at games again. But I feel like this is a pretty solid foundation and something that I feel has gotten me through quite a lot of games. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to be notified when I drop more videos. But I will catch you next time. Again, feel free to drop me a subscribe on my blog as well when I post various types of articles. And I also stream on Twitch, so feel free to follow me there too. And I hope to catch you around. Until then, have a great rest of 2020, and I'll see you all in 2021.